Welcome back. Today we are sewing the Nova Twist blouse and dress. This is a pattern by Designer Stitch. I hope you enjoy the tutorial and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I have made several versions of the Nova Twist top and the dress, and I am barely 5'1", so the main adjustments that I make are shortening the bodice by about 1 3/4 inch and moving the bust dart up about an inch. And for my dresses, I like them a little bit longer, so I just lengthened the hem. The front pattern piece, main pattern piece, and the side pattern piece are cut with the fabric side up. Normally, when we're sewing patterns, we have two pieces and we will fold them over to mirror each other. That is not the case with the front pattern piece and the side pattern piece. And now it's time to start sewing. The first thing I do is sew all of the darts. Here I am sewing the bust dart, and on the back of the blouse there are some fisheye darts. So go ahead and sew those darts. When it comes to tying off the end of the dart, I like to leave my thread longer and do at least one knot at the point. You don't want to backstitch your darts. Now we're going to take the front side piece and we are going to fold the notch on the side in half. The little piece that's sticking out on the pattern, we're going to fold that in half, and there's notches on the pattern, and if you just watch what I'm doing here, you'll sew from one notch to the other, and that's going to leave a hole. Eventually what we're going to do is we're going to take the front piece and thread it through the side piece, and I'll show you that here in a minute. So now we've created the hole, and our next step is to take the hemline of our front piece and thread it through that hole. So you're going to take the front piece right side up and you're going to thread it through the back side, the wrong side of the side piece. So you're going to gently pull the front side through until you see the notches, and you're going to thread the front side through in between those notches, and then you're going to fold the hemline in half, and that is going to create the top and the bottom piece of the front bodice. So here I'm just checking to make sure that my notches are in the correct spot, because this is going to create the twist for the side part of the bodice. And one thing that you want to make sure is that the front piece and the side piece are completely lined up with each other. You don't want to flip any of the pieces up or out of the way. You want to make sure that they're both just laying flat. Now, as you can see here, I have folded, just as the pattern says, I have folded the bodice attachment in half, and this is going to create the line that differentiates between the top bodice and the bottom bodice piece. So as you're coming up to the side piece where the twist is being created, you don't want to sew all the way up to that. You want to have some drape, but you don't want to have a humongous gap either. So just sew up until you can sew no more, and that will create that bodice piece. I'm using my pinking shears to help the material from unraveling when I am evening out my seams. And you can use your serger or whatever method you like to finish up your seams. But for this particular fabric, I'm just using my pinking shears. So here you can see where the twist has been created. The next step that we're going to do is we're going to attach the main front piece to the side piece, and that is going to create that whole front bodice. There is a little bit to sew at the bottom, and there is a notch right at the top of the twist, and it's less than an inch. So we're going to go ahead and sew up the side front to the front main piece, and then just a little bit to close up that gap on the bottom of the side piece, just as the pattern indicates. Our front piece is now connected to our side piece, and our twist is now complete. The next step is to connect the front and the back piece together at the shoulders, and then we're going to connect the neck binding. The next thing we're going to do is add our neck binding. In the pattern, there is an option for a turtleneck, and if you're following that option, you will do that now as well. But I'm just going to go ahead and do the neck binding. So I like to obviously mark the center front and the center back, and then what you're going to do is just follow the instructions in the pattern, but basically you just fold your line of neck binding in half, right sides together, and use the seam allowance and sew it together to make a circular binding, and then fold it in half again and mark the centers and the quarters, and then you're going to go ahead and attach that. You can fold over your binding, or you can just, with a knit fabric, they don't ravel. It depends on how you like the look to be. If you want a more finished look, then go ahead and fold it over. But if you don't mind the raw edges on the inside, then just go ahead and fold it over to match that neckline and sew. And you can also use your serger as well. So one tip I have when you're sewing on a neck binding and when you're using a knit fabric, most pattern designers design the neck binding to be a little bit smaller than the neck opening. And that is because you want to stretch the fabric when you're sewing, and that way it will lay flat against your neck and have a really nice look. So when you're sewing, don't stretch the neck opening of your main pattern piece, but stretch the neck binding. And when you're pinning, you should be able to pin all the way around, but sometimes you'll have those gaps, and that is because your neck binding pattern piece is smaller than the neck opening. But don't stretch, as you can see here, don't stretch your fabric for your main pattern piece, but stretch your binding as you're sewing along. Now it's time to continue to sew our neck binding. And as I was explaining before, you can double over your binding so that you don't have any raw edges, or if you don't mind, you can just fold over once and have a raw edge. When you're using knit fabric, it doesn't ravel, so it just all depends on the look that you want. I personally prefer to double it over, and so I'm folding up the neck seam so that it will get caught in the stitching, because when we sew it, we're going to turn this over and stitch from the front and stitch in the ditch. And that way it's going to catch both the binding and the seam. Our neck binding is complete, and right now I'm just checking to make sure that all the edges were caught, and you can see how nicely this lays. And don't mind my fabric, it does have a white cast to it, and that's just the fabric. So yeah, that's the front of the neck binding, so you can see how nice it lays. Our next step is going to sew up the side seams, and then we're going to add the sleeves, hem, and then we are done. And for the dressed version, it is the exact same construction. The only thing that's going to be different, instead of leaving a gap at the side, you're going to sew that gap all the way up to complete that side seam for the dress. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I'll leave the link to the Designer Stitch Facebook page. I would love to see you over there and to see all the Nova twist tops and dresses that you have made. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel.